Welcome to this episode of our program, Daily Debate. As usual, we will be discussing important topics. Tonight, we are celebrating the glorious day of the 1973, or October 1973 victory. Egypt is celebrating those great moments and the most glorious days, the day of the crossing the line between despair and hope, the past and the future. The 6th of October 1973 does not only represent a significant military victory the armed forces have achieved aptly, but it is also a unique expression of a nation's will and the people's unity. Egyptians were inspired by their great ancient history to remain strong and unbending. Egypt is celebrating one of its greatest and most glorious days. And definitely, this day we remember every day. It marks a great hope for our future. This is the 50th anniversary of, or the Golden Jubilee, so it's a matter of pride and proudness for that day, and this is what we will be speaking tonight. Before we delve into our discussion, let me first take the top story of the day. And the Human Rights Department or Committee at the Senate has denounced the EU statement and asserted that it was not obligatory. The Secretary General of the Human Rights Committee at the Senate, along with other parliamentarians, have denounced the interference or the latest European Union interference, describing it as a severe interference to the domestic affairs, and asserting that the call for some on others to interfere is an attack to Egypt's sovereignty and stability. The Parliament has said that a number of misleading information were put to the Egyptian realism, and said that Egypt does not accept for any outside interference in its domestic affairs, and that any statements are not obligatory for Egypt. To highlight the issue, we have with us over the phone His Excellency Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good evening to you, Your Excellency.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you so much. And definitely we are at the night of a great day for Egypt, the great October victory. And definitely we have just heard the statements of the European Union. How do you read such a statement, and how do you read such interference in the Egyptian domestic affairs?
I have a very strong stand here since 1995, when we started negotiations with Europe for the association agreement. Because in our agreement with Europe, Article 3 is saying that this agreement and the relation between Egypt and the European Union will be based on the principles of democracy and human rights. I stopped there. Which human rights do you mean? I have to define which human rights do you mean. Because we have in our tradition some practices which is not acceptable in Europe. Many practices in Europe is not acceptable in our culture. So I insisted to add, I was the only negotiator who added the human rights according to the International Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations, 1946. because it was drafted by many experts. One of them was the Egyptian representative to the United Nations. Also, we added, bearing in mind the differences between cultures, because if we are talking about justice, of course, we all are for justice, but don't use it in a mean way. And I recall here a very famous say of the foreign minister of the United States to Amr Moussa. He told him, we are not the best country in human rights practices, but we have to follow some guidance here and there. Above all, I want to start by saying, if we are talking about development assistance coming from the United States or from Europe, it is less than 2% of our national income, so it's not a big issue. Second, every dollar we are getting from, or every euro we are getting from the European Union, we buy imports and exports of Europe, of course, of 101 euros. It is 1% of what we are buying from Europe. As of the United States, it is 1 to 66. So always I say, if there is a sort of penalty, they will suffer from it much more than us.
Your Excellency, according to the international laws and conventions, how far does this kind of statements are viewed like severe interference in the domestic affairs, and to which extent do any state has the right for such interference?
Yes, you remind me that this is not the first time the European Union or the European Parliament is issuing some declaration like that. It happened 10, 15 years ago, and I was by that time in a very close relation with our Parliament Speaker, Dr. Suru. And we put them in a position that the head of the European Parliament came to Egypt to explain their position. And he met our General Committee in our Parliament, explaining the situation. Here I want to tell you some details here, because when we discussed the matter with them, I am telling them that we are ready with you to take the same law and implement it in our country and in your cases, because you do not accept establishing civil organization without asking permission from the authorities. And this is our position. You do not accept any remarks concerning your justice system. This is not acceptable. And now human rights, it comes to, they ask you to stop the death penalty from your law. We cannot do that. They ask you to stop marrying more than one wife. We cannot do that. But more
Your Excellency, if I may ask you here,
they
yes.
ask you to accept, wait a minute, to accept the freedom of sexual orientation.
Yes, if I may ask you...
A man to marry to a man, a woman to marry to a woman. We will never accept this.
From the perspective you're speaking about here, sir, we're speaking about different cultures here. From your point of view, to which resources or sources do they put their point of views, or do they put their information, and thus put their own statements? And to it, how credible are their sources, and to which extent does this, or the source they had their information from, is considered outlaw?
Yeah. I want to tell you that in all my life negotiating with Europe, it is now a quarter of a century of negotiation. I never met anybody who seriously disagree with us. And the problem with the United States that you have four organizations. The Pentagon and the Foreign Office, they both read quite well the files and they know the importance of Egypt and the importance of keeping good relations with Egypt. The problem is in the Congress and the Senate and the presidency, because they are under the pressure of some groups who are pushing forward against Egypt. But in serious negotiations and serious talks between Egypt and the American officially, or the European officially, I do not see any problem.
Right.
But we have to deal with this. We have to put it in the right
on the right track
form without exaggeration.
Indeed.
Because I am quite sure that I can stay very quiet and one day we shall get whatever we agreed upon all the time. We agreed upon fighting the organized crime, which is terrorism, illegal migration, drug trafficking, and fighting against terrorism.
Right.
Those we agree upon it. And I cannot say enough words about how the Europeans are appreciating Egypt, respecting all these efforts, and we are in very good cooperation with Europe and the Americans about that.
We would, according to our diplomacy or according to our diplomatic constants, the non-interference in the internal affairs of others, and mutual respect. Your Excellency, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you so much for being with us and for your input here.